Okay, hello again everybody. This is Bart from GiantScaleNews.com, and we're moving along with our video series of getting started with giant scale RC planes. And the airplane that you saw in the first video, it's a Linear RC. That's a company that's not around anymore, but Linear made this airplane. It's a 73-inch Edge 540, and I had this airplane for a little while. I bought it as part of an estate that I purchased, and I sold almost everything. I had kept this, I flew it a little bit, and then I sold it to a friend of mine. The last flight that I had with it, the rudder, the plane flipped over, the rudder crunched the fin, and so when I got it back from my friend Eric for this project, I bought it back, I had forgotten about this. So what had happened was, right before I sold it, I had this little flip over with it. I crunched it a little bit, and then I've been thinking about this. What I did was I took the fin out, and it was loose. This block where the hinge mounts had snapped, so the bottom of the rudder was loose, and so I had started working on getting this out. So that's why it's all broken up, because it was removed from the back of the fuselage here. But enough parts were kept, and it was kept intact enough where it could be used to make a new fin. So that's what this video is going to be about. We're going to make a new fin. We're going to mount it in the back of this airplane. Show you how that goes, like that. Okay, you can see that's going to go in there, and we'll mount the rudder to it. That'll go there. Okay, so that'll move, and then we'll get to work putting it all back together again. So that's the project. Let's go about the first step, which is going to be to take this, draw a, document all these little pieces, the thicknesses, the materials. We'll draw a plan that we can work off of, and then we'll finish taking this apart. We're going to reuse this rib and this rib. This one is actually the same as the one that was down here. So I'm going to have to make one of these, and then up at the top, I'm going to have to kind of guesstimate what this top rib would have looked like for capping this. Okay, and then we'll make the trailing edge piece, we'll make a leading edge piece, we'll put it all together, we'll sheet both sides with balsa, okay, and then we'll sand it so it's nice and smooth, has a nice rounded leading edge, and then once it's all done, we'll mount the rudder. We'll make the mounting holes for the rudder, we'll cover it probably with monocoat, and we'll slap some GSN stickers on there at some point. Alright, so let's get to work. Whoops. Let's get to work. Okay guys, we're continuing with the rebuild of the fin for the Linear Edge 540, and here's the fin that you saw earlier in the video, and here's the drawing that I did. Let me just make sure it's focused. So this is the drawing that I made using the fin, the old fin, and what I tried to do was get the dimensions correct. I tried to get the placement of the ribs exactly where they're supposed to go so that this leading edge will fall into place the way that it's supposed to. And we've got the blocks for the hinges. There's one here, and using the rudder, I'm not going to move these hinge points, so I know where they go. So those are in the right spot, and I've got some blocks laid out. They're going to have to go inside the fuselage, inside the fin for the hinges. So with this done, I've also got lines that show the grain of the wood. If you look at this, you can see the wood is oriented so the grain is running vertically in the fin. The grain in the blocks is also vertical, and I've got thicknesses of the wood too. I've got butterfingers today. This trailing edge is going to be 1/8 of an inch thick. The ribs, this one, and this top one that I'm going to make are going to be 3/32 of an inch. The bottom one, I think the bottom broke loose on this, and that was what caused the whole thing to have to get taken out. But so this bottom rib I'm going to make 1/8 inch, and this leading edge strip is going to be 1/8 inch, and then the balsa sheeting is 1/16 of an inch. So with all of that done, now that I've documented what exactly or how exactly this is made, I can take it apart the rest of the way with this as the record as to how I have to go back to making another one of these. So the next step to get this ready to be rebuilt is to just take it apart. And all I'm going to try to salvage from this piece that we've been working with, all I'm going to try to salvage are the two ribs, these two. Pretty much everything else is garbage. We used it just to get an idea. This might be overexposing, but you know, we only kept it around to get the measurements off of it. But now that we've done that, I'm just going to use the two tools we talked about earlier, and I'm going to try to make a nice clean cut. And what I'm doing here is I'm not cutting right down to the piece that I need. I'm cutting around it just to get it loose so I don't break it. And then once the pieces are loose from this old fin, what I'll do is you know, I'll work on cleaning them up so I have them down to their final size. Alright. So that's the bottom rib. And that's the top rib. And then this one is kind of loose. I just don't want to snap it. That's why I'm using the saw. There, kind of pop loose. I'm just trying to score this wood. Just trying to score this wood so that I can get rid of this balsa sheeting. None of this stuff has any salvage value. This rib is actually cracked. That's why it's kind of flopping around. But we just finish cutting it and we'll glue it back together again using our CA glue. And what I'm going to do is, now that I've got these two ribs loose, I'll just snap some of that off, some of that off. I can see where the crack is. So I'll use this thin CA glue and I'm going to hold the piece together, put a little bit on the joint where the crack is. Sometimes blowing on it helps. Okay, and then what I'll do is I'll use my X-Acto knife, just put a fresh blade in, and I'll just slice along the edge there, and I'm going to get these pretty close to being the right size, and then I'm going to hit them with sandpaper. Okay, just continuing to use basic hand tools, the drawing that was made earlier, and balsa and some CA glue. Okay, using the thick stuff and the thin stuff. I've been able to make some progress. I've got a new fin made. Just have to sheet it now, give it some final sanding, and it'll be ready to have the rudder mounted to it. We'll cover it and put it back in the airplane. So this has been kind of tricky to make, actually. Because this was probably made this way in a jig in a factory somewhere, because this was an ARF, and here I am trying to freehand it, you know, on my workbench. So I did bring this block up into the corner just to reinforce that corner, so there's a little bit of extra wood there compared to the original. This block was down, locked into the corner, so by the block being in the corner, you're providing a lot of gluing surface for these two thin pieces to be held together. So that same thing is happening up here. Plus, you know, I'm making this freehand, so having this block of wood cut to a nice square corner allows these two pieces to align very nicely. Alright, so here's the sheeting material, 16th inch balsa. It's going to be tricky to get the sheeting on there. One way to do it maybe is to stand it up, you know, attach both of the trailing edge, you know, both of the pieces at the trailing edge first, get it all locked in, and then peel it back, put some glue in there, and then roll it together and hold it while that instant CA glue cures. But I'm counting on these nice square edges, right? I'm counting on those nice square edges to be a guide, because this fin is still kind of flimsy, it still has some play in it, and I don't want it to come together, you know, as I'm gluing it. You know, I don't want it to be all crooked, so I'm counting on getting this trailing edge on there nice and straight, and then using this square edge to line up this bottom rib, so that when I glue it, I know it's all perfect. Before we go any further with the fin, couple things real quick. I just want to talk about sandpaper. I should have included this in the first video. Sandpaper comes in different grits. So the grit is generally a measure of how much sand there is per square inch. So this is 40 grit. The number on the back is the grit. And let me just... There we go. So the number on the back of the sandpaper is the grit. So this is 80, 40. 40 would be 40 grains of sand in a square inch. And the higher the number, the finer it is, and the better the surface it's going to leave after you're done. Sanding by hand on balsa is not really recommended. Here's our fin. If I had sanded this by hand, it would have been all wavy. There'd be gouges and stuff like that. It wouldn't be perfectly flat and smooth. And then when you cover it with your covering material, you would see those waves and gouges and stuff. So the imperfections show through with the monocoat or ultra coat, whatever it is you're using. So when you're using these different grits of sandpaper, whenever possible you want to use a sanding block. And the bigger the project, the bigger the block should be. If you're doing little fine work, you might be able to get away with, this is a scrap piece of wood, but you might have a sanding block this size just for working around a particular area. So finer sandpapers mean higher numbers. They give better finishes. So this is 220. This would be a nice grit to use on balsa before covering it. And always use a sanding block. Wrap the sandpaper around it and use that to make sure you get nice, straight finishes on things. And also, real quick, you know, some of you might be saying, I think I got a mail from a user named Steven in Cleveland. He said, Bart, why are you rebuilding a fin as part of your project? And, you know, it's not just about the fin. It's about rebuilding things. So maybe you're watching me rebuild this fin and you're seeing the steps and it's giving you an idea how you could rebuild the wingtip on your smashed up airplane, or how you might be able to replace the firewall on an airplane. So it's not so much the fin that I'm specifically saying, hey, go out and buy an airplane that needs a new fin. I'm just saying it's not such a big deal to take these things, deconstruct them, figure out how they were made, and then make new ones. Some of you guys, you know, this is a scratch-built fin. In RC, scratch-built usually means, oh my God, I can't do that. But I think, you know, from the steps we've done so far, you've seen that it's probably something a lot of you could do. So it's not so much about the fin, it's about the steps, getting an airplane flying again. So far we've talked about sandpaper, we've talked about balsa, we've talked about laying up, you know, the drawing for your part. So it's the process, it's not necessarily the piece. The next step in completing our fin. I keep thinking we're talking about a Norwegian guy, but no. We're talking about the fin for the airplane. The next step is going to be to put covering material on it. And we're using this material, believe it or not, this is Tower Coat, which is the bargain version of Monocoat that is sold by Tower Hobbies. I just happen to have a roll of this. I think, you know, the colors on this airplane are not quite Monocoat colors, so it might be Ultra Coat, but the orange of Ultra Coat matches the orangish red of this Tower Coat. Somebody gave me a bag of like 20 rolls of different covering materials that they had in their shop. They were cleaning it out. They said, hey Bart, you build airplanes, you want this? So they gave it to me. But what we're going to do is, you always work top down with these things, just like sealing up a house. You want all of your seams to work in the downward direction, so that, you know, instead of having it like this, where you know, like an oil residue would seep down into the seam, you want it like this, so the residue runs down the covering, it doesn't get under it. Also, you want to cover back to front for the same reason, but now we're talking about wind. You want the wind to blow over the seam like that so that it won't lift the piece that's behind the front piece. So what we're going to do is we're going to go top to bottom and back to front. That's how you cover. So we're going to put a piece on the top, the back, and then the side, and we're going to roll it over the leading edge, and we'll get that done. So the first step when you're covering is to make sure you're without any dust. Alright, so you're vacuuming to make sure there's no dust on the surface of the wood, and that means when you put the covering material down, it sticks to the wood itself. It's not sticking to a layer of dust. When it sticks to the wood itself, it stays stuck. Now, there's all sorts of advanced ways to do this. You can seal this wood so that the wood grain stays put. It doesn't have a tendency to lift over time and allow the covering to come loose, but I'm not going to do that this time. Like we've been saying all along, this is kind of a beater project for me. This airplane might not have a very long lifespan, so I'm just going to get it flying. So I've gotten rid of all the dust. I've sanded it pretty well with fine sandpaper so the surface is nice and smooth. So I'm just going to get to covering it, and we'll do that in a series of steps. I'm just going to edit the steps together without doing much talking. I have the temperature on this set to a nice medium range, and that'll get everything stuck. If I have any spots where I really need to shrink it a little more, I might turn the temperature up a little bit. So we're going to go top piece, back piece, roll it, you'll see the overlaps that I leave, and then we'll do side, side, and it'll be done. We'll just poke holes for the hinges to go into, there and there, and this will be ready to go. Alright, so stand by. We're going to do some covering. Welcome back, everybody. The camera I'm using has the nice habit of stopping after 13 minutes. So the video stopped when I was covering the one side, and then when I went to cover the other side, the video didn't start. I hit the button, I thought the light was on, and it didn't start. So I ended up covering both sides. Got it on there. It's nice and smooth. And what I then did was I sat it where it goes on the airplane. And in fact, let me see if I can show that to you. My bench is a mess from trying to make this video for 2 days. So here's the airplane. Let's see if I can sneak this in here. Reposition the camera while I'm talking. Okay, so you see the phone. Don't you love when the phone rings? You're shooting a video. So what happens is the fin fits in here, and because there's a glue joint here, this is the turtle deck, the trailing edge of the turtle deck. So there's a glue joint in here, and this gets glued inside as well. So this fits here now. That turtle deck gets pushed up against it. Can you see that? The video is going to be dark, but so for this glue joint to be effective, this has to be bare wood. So you have to peel the material back. Okay, so we're basically done. I cut the holes out for the hinges. You can see those. Let me get this out of the way. Killing the exposure. Here's my messy shop. There's my workbench. So, got the holes there. This is going to go into here. And I'm just going to glue it into place. Alright, and that's the end of our project, making a new fin. So, like I was saying before, if there's a nice airplane out there, somebody in your flying club is getting rid of it, and it just needs a little work, don't be afraid to take it on as a project. It can be very rewarding to take an airplane in, to resurrect it, do some work, get it flying again. Alright? Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, post them at giantscalenews.com and we'll talk about them. Thank you.